The smell of burning biscuits hit Samuel Thornton's nose before he even reached the homestead door, and he wondered if maybe this job interview was going to kill him before the outlaws ever got the chance. He had ridden 3 days from Tucson to reach this remote cattle ranch outside Coolidge, Arizona, in the scorching summer of 1883, and his throat was drier than the desert sand. When the door swung open, though, every thought of water and rest vanished from his mind. The woman standing there had flour on her cheek, wild auburn hair escaping from pins that had given up their battle hours ago, and the most striking green eyes he had ever seen. She was holding a smoking pan at arm's length, her expression caught somewhere between embarrassment and defiance. "You must be the cowhand my father hired before he passed," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. "I'm Rose Walker. I'd shake your hand, but I'm currently disposing of what was supposed to be dinner." Samuel removed his hat, suddenly aware of how much dust covered his clothes. "Samuel Thornton, madam. I'm sorry for your loss. Your father seemed like a good man from our correspondence." Rose walked past him and dumped the charred remains into a bucket near the porch. "He was the best. He also apparently thought I could run this ranch alone, which shows that even good men can be wildly optimistic." She turned back to face him, and he saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight she was carrying. "Can you actually work cattle, Mr. Thornton, or were you just good at writing letters?" "I can work cattle, madam. Been doing it since I was 12. "I'm 23, not a madam," she said, brushing past him into the house. "And I hope you are not particular about your food because cooking is not among my talents. My father did most of it, and now that he's gone, well, you saw the biscuits." Samuel followed her inside, taking in the modest but well-built home. Everything was neat except the kitchen, which looked like a flour bomb had exploded. "I can cook some," he offered. "Nothing fancy, but I will not poison us." Rose spun around, and for the first time a smile cracked her worried expression. "Mr. Thornton, if you can cook and work cattle, you might be the answer to my prayers. Though I should warn you, the ranch is in bad shape. We lost cattle to rustlers last month. The water rights are being challenged by our neighbor, and I have about 3 months of money left." Still interested, he should have said no. Any sensible man would have mounted his horse and ridden back to Tucson. But something about the stubborn set of her jaw and the desperate hope in her eyes made him nod. "I am interested. Your father offered me $40 a month and room and board. That still stand?" "It does. The room is the small cabin out back. It is not much, but it has a roof and a bed." She moved to the stove, staring at it like it was a puzzle she could not solve. "I suppose we should figure out dinner. I have eggs and some salt pork. Even I cannot ruin eggs too badly." "Let me," Samuel said, stepping forward. He set his hat on the table and rolled up his sleeves. "You look like you could use a break." Rose hesitated, pride and exhaustion warring on her face. Finally, exhaustion won. She sank into a chair at the kitchen table, watching as he found a clean pan and started working. "My cooking will probably end you," she joked, though there was real worry underneath the words. Samuel cracked eggs into the pan, adding a bit of water to make them fluffy the way his mother had taught him. He glanced over his shoulder and found her watching him with those remarkable eyes. Something warm unfurled in his chest, dangerous and unexpected. He grinned. What a way to go, then! The laugh that burst from Rose was surprised and genuine, transforming her entire face. "You might regret that sentiment after a week of my attempts at beans." "I have eaten scorpion when I was desperate enough," he said, cutting up the salt pork. "I think I can survive your beans." They ate dinner as the sun set, painting the Arizona sky in shades of orange and purple. Rose told him about the ranch, how her father had built it from nothing 15 years ago, how her mother had died when Rose was 10, how it had just been the two of them making it work. She told him about the neighbor, a man named Carson who owned the bigger spread to the east and wanted to buy her out for pennies on the dollar. She told him about the rustlers who seemed to know exactly when and where to strike. By the time she finished, full dark had fallen, and Samuel understood why her father had wanted to hire help before he died. "You are in a tight spot," he said honestly. "But it is not impossible. We will need to move the cattle to the north pasture where we can watch them better. And I will ride into Coolidge tomorrow, talk to the sheriff about the rustling." "Sheriff Mackin is in Carson's pocket," Rose said bitterly. "He will not help. Then we handle it ourselves." Samuel met her eyes across the table. "I signed on to work this ranch, Miss Walker." "That means I see it through." Something shifted in her expression, a wall coming down just slightly. "Rose, if we are going to save this place together, you should call me Rose. Samuel, or Sam if you prefer." She nodded slowly. "Sam, I like that better anyway." She stood, gathering the dishes. "You must be exhausted from your ride. The cabin should be ready. There are blankets in the chest, and I put fresh water in the pitcher this morning." Samuel stood as well, suddenly reluctant to leave the warm circle of lamplight and her company. "Thank you. I will be up before dawn to start assessing the stock." "I will be up too," Rose said firmly. "This is my ranch. I intend to learn everything about running it." He smiled. "Never doubted it for a second." The cabin was small but clean, and Samuel lay in bed listening to the night sounds of the desert. Coyotes called in the distance, and somewhere an owl hooted. He thought about Rose Walker with her flour-dusted cheek and stubborn chin, and he knew he was in trouble of a different sort than outlaws or rustlers. He had been working ranches since he left home at 15, never staying long in one place, never letting himself get attached. Something told him this job was going to be different. He was right. The next morning, Samuel was saddling his horse when Rose emerged from the house wearing split riding skirts and a man's shirt that had probably belonged to her father. Her hair was braided and pinned up properly, and she had a rifle slung over her shoulder. She caught his surprised look and raised an eyebrow. "What? Did you think I was going to let you ride out alone? I figured you had work here." "The work is out there," she said, gesturing to the range. "And I meant what I said. I need to know this ranch inside and out." They spent the morning riding the property lines, and Samuel was impressed despite himself. Rose knew every water source, every good grazing spot, every place where the fence was weak. Her father had taught her well, even if he had not taught her to cook. The cattle were in decent shape, though there were fewer than the count her father had mentioned in his letters. Rose's expression grew grimmer as they tallied the numbers. "We are missing at least 30 head," she said finally. "Maybe more. When did the rustling start?" "About 2 months ago, right after Father got sick." She stared out across the range, her jaw tight. "It feels personal, like someone was waiting for him to weaken." Samuel had been thinking the same thing. Rustlers usually hit multiple ranches, not just one. This felt targeted. "Tell me about Carson," Rose sighed. "Hiram Carson owns the Triple C Ranch to the east. He has been trying to buy us out for years. Father always refused. After Father took ill, Carson started coming around more, making offers. The day after the funeral, he showed up with papers, said he would give me $2,000 for everything. What is it worth? At least 10,000 if the cattle were all here and the water rights were secure." Her hands clenched on the reins. "He is trying to steal it, Sam. I know he is behind the rustling, I just cannot prove it." They rode in silence for a while, Samuel thinking. If Carson was behind it, he would be careful. Men who stole ranches did not usually get their own hands dirty. But everyone made mistakes eventually. "We will catch them," he said. Set up watches at night, move the herd closer. And I am still going into Coolidge. Even if the sheriff will not help, I want to make noise about it. Let Carson know we are not rolling over." Rose looked at him then, really looked at him, and he felt the weight of her gaze. "Why are you doing this? You could find easier work somewhere else. Safer work." He could have lied, given her a practical answer. Instead, he found himself telling the truth. "Your father's letter found me at a low point. I had just left a ranch where the owner was mistreating his hands. I was about ready to give up on finding decent people in this business. Your father wrote about building something that lasted, about doing right by the land and the animals. It made me want to be part of something like that." He paused. "And now that I have met you, I want to see you keep what your father built." Color rose in Rose's cheeks, and she looked away. "We should head back. I need to check the chickens, and you should ride into town before it gets too late." But something had shifted between them, a connection forming like the first threads of a rope being woven together. Coolidge was a small town, just a main street with a general store, a saloon, a hotel, and a sheriff's office. Samuel tied his horse outside the sheriff's office and went inside. Sheriff Mackin was a heavy-set man with a gray mustache and suspicious eyes. He listened to Samuel's report about the missing cattle with obvious disinterest. "Rustling happens," Mackin said finally. "Could be anyone passing through. Could be Apache, though they have been quiet lately. Without catching them in the act, there is not much I can do." 30 head is not a small loss," Samuel pressed, "and it seems targeted. Only the Walker Ranch has been hit." Mackin's eyes narrowed. "You are new here, so let me explain something. Rose Walker is a young woman trying to run a ranch alone. It is not going to work. She would be better off selling to someone who can manage it properly and moving to town, maybe finding a husband. That is what her father should have arranged before he passed." Samuel felt anger rise in his chest but kept his voice level. "Miss Walker has every right to run her ranch, and she has help now. I will be watching those cattle, Sheriff. If the rustlers come back, we will handle it." "You do that," Mackin said dismissively. "Just make sure you stay on the right side of the law while you are playing cowboy." Samuel left before he said something he would regret. He stopped at the general store to pick up supplies, and the clerk, a thin man named Peters, was more sympathetic. "I am sorry about her father," Peters said as he tallied up the flour, coffee, and beans. "John Walker was a good man, and Rose is a good woman. It is a shame what Carson is trying to do. You know about that," Peters lowered his voice. "Everyone knows. Carson wants that land because it has the best water access in the region. He has been buying up smaller ranches for years, and the Walker place is the last piece he needs to control the whole valley. But John would not sell, and Rose will not either. Carson is not used to hearing no." "Is he the type to resort to rustling?" Peters hesitated, then nodded slowly. "He has men who would do it for him. No proof, you understand, but everyone has their suspicions. You watch yourself out there, Mr. Thornton. Carson does not like obstacles." Samuel rode back to the ranch with a heavy feeling in his gut. This was worse than a simple land dispute. If Carson was ruthless enough to steal from a woman who had just lost her father, he would be ruthless enough for worse. Rose was in the barn when he returned, mucking out stalls. She looked up as he entered, hope and dread mixed on her face. "What did the sheriff say?" "Nothing helpful. He suggested you should sell and find a husband." Her expression darkened. "Of course he did. Half this town thinks a woman running a ranch is unnatural. The other half is waiting for me to fail so they can say I told you so." Samuel grabbed a pitchfork and started helping with the stalls. "Then we will not fail." They worked in comfortable silence for a while. Samuel found himself watching her out of the corner of his eye, noticing the way she moved with efficient grace, the determined set of her shoulders. She caught him looking once and smiled, a quick flash that made his heart skip. "What?" she asked. "Just thinking you do not seem like someone who gives up easy." "I do not give up at all," she said firmly. "My father did not raise a quitter. He used to say that the desert teaches you to be stubborn or be dead. Smart man. The smartest." Her voice softened. "I miss him every day. Some mornings I wake up and forget he is gone, and then I remember and it is like losing him all over again." Samuel stopped working, leaning on the pitchfork. "I lost my father when I was 15. Fever took him. It gets easier, but it never really stops hurting." "Is that why you left home?" He nodded. "My mother remarried a year later. Her new husband did not want a grown son around, so I took to the road. Been working ranches ever since." "Do you ever see her, your mother?" "Not in 8 years." He said it matter-of-factly, but Rose heard the hurt underneath. "I am sorry." "It is what it is. I made my choice to leave." He went back to work, uncomfortable with the sympathy in her eyes. "Point is, I understand what it is like to lose someone and have to keep going. You are doing better than I did. I had no choice. The ranch does not stop needing care just because I am grieving." They finished the stalls and moved on to checking the tack, repairing a broken rein. The sun was setting when Rose finally declared them done for the day. "I suppose I should attempt dinner," she said without enthusiasm. "How about I cook again tonight and you can watch?" Samuel suggested. "Maybe pick up some tricks." Rose laughed. "I am not sure I am teachable, but I appreciate the optimism." In the kitchen, Samuel showed her how to make a simple stew with the salt pork, beans, and some wild onions he had spotted growing near the creek. Rose watched with intense concentration, as if he were teaching her to defuse a bomb rather than cook dinner. "The trick is low heat and patience," he explained. "Let it simmer and the flavors come together." "Low heat and patience," Rose repeated. "I usually just turn the heat up high and hope for the best." That would explain the burned biscuits. She swatted him with a dish towel, but she was grinning. "Careful, or I will make you eat my cooking out of spite." "Threats already. I have only been here 2 days. Just setting expectations early." They ate dinner at the kitchen table again, and Samuel found himself telling her stories from his years on the road. He told her about the time he had to outrun a flash flood in New Mexico, about the ranch in Colorado, where the owner's wife made the best apple pie he had ever tasted, about breaking a wild Mustang that everyone else had given up on. Rose listened with rapt attention, asking questions, laughing at the funny parts. "You have seen so much," she said when he finished. "I have barely been outside Arizona." "Would you want to travel, I mean?" She considered the question seriously. "Maybe someday, but this is home. The ranch is where I belong. My father built something here and I want to honor that." "He would be proud of you," Samuel said quietly. Rose's eyes grew bright with unshed tears. "I hope so. I am terrified I am going to fail and lose everything he worked for." "You will not fail. I will not let you." The words hung between them, a promise that felt like more than just hired hand to employer. Rose looked at him, and the air seemed to thicken. Samuel was acutely aware of how close they were sitting, how easy it would be to reach across the table and take her hand. Instead, he stood abruptly. "I should check the stock one more time before full dark." Rose blinked, the moment breaking. "Right, yes, I will clean up here." Outside, Samuel leaned against the barn and tried to get his racing heart under control. He could not afford to fall for Rose Walker. She was his employer, and she was dealing with enough without him adding complications. But as he looked back at the warm light spilling from the kitchen window, he knew it was already too late. He was falling, had been falling since she opened the door with flour on her cheek and fire in her eyes. The question was what he was going to do about it. The answer came a week later, in the form of gunshots in the night. Samuel woke to the sound of cattle lowing in distress and shots being fired. He was out of bed and pulling on his boots before his eyes were fully open. He grabbed his rifle and ran toward the pasture where they had moved the main herd. In the moonlight, he could see shapes moving, riders trying to cut out cattle and drive them away. Another shot rang out, this one from the house. Rose appeared on the porch, her rifle raised. Sam, north side. He ran toward the north pasture, his heart pounding. There were at least 3 riders that he could see, maybe more. They had cut out about 10 head and were trying to drive them toward the property line. Samuel raised his rifle and fired a shot over their heads, a warning. That is far enough. He shouted. One of the riders wheeled his horse around, and Samuel saw the glint of a gun barrel. He dropped and rolled as a shot tore through the space where he had been standing. Rose fired from the porch, and the rider cursed, spurring his horse away. The other rustlers abandoned the cattle and fled, disappearing into the darkness. Samuel ran to the scattered cattle, calming them with voice and presence. His hands were shaking from adrenaline. He had been in tight spots before, but the thought of Rose in danger made everything feel more urgent, more terrifying. She appeared beside him, her face pale in the moonlight. "Are you hurt?" "I am fine." "You?" "I am fine." "Did you see who they were?" "Too dark." "But they were organized." "Knew what they were doing." He looked toward where the riders had disappeared. "They will be back." Rose's jaw set in a hard line. "Then we will be ready." They spent the rest of the night taking turns on watch, but the rustlers did not return. By dawn, they were both exhausted and running on coffee. Samuel examined the ground where the riders had been, looking for tracks. He found hoofprints heading east toward Carson's property. "This is not proof," Rose said, looking at the tracks. "It could be a coincidence. We both know it is not." She sighed, running a hand over her face. "Even if we rode to Carson's ranch right now and saw our cattle, he would just claim he bought them fair and square. Without catching his men in the act and getting them to talk, we have nothing." Samuel hated that she was right. They were in an impossible position. "Then we make sure they cannot try again. We move the cattle closer to the house, set up a proper watch rotation. I will sleep days and watch nights for a while." "You cannot go without proper sleep, Sam. You will kill yourself." "Better than letting them steal us blind." Rose grabbed his arm, her fingers tight. "No, not better. We will figure this out, but not at the cost of your health." He looked down at where her hand gripped his arm, then up at her face. She was close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her green eyes, could smell the soap she used. His free hand came up almost of its own accord, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Rose," he said softly. She swayed toward him, and for a heartbeat, he thought she was going to kiss him. Then she stepped back, dropping her hand from his arm. "We should get some breakfast. Long day ahead." Samuel let her go, even though every instinct told him to pull her back. This was not the time. They had too much to deal with, too many threats circling, but God help him, he wanted her. Wanted to protect her, wanted to see her smile, wanted to kiss her until neither of them could breathe. The realization should have terrified him. Instead, it felt inevitable, like watching a storm roll in across the desert. You could see it coming from miles away, but there was no stopping it. Over the next 2 weeks, they fell into a rhythm. Rose started learning to cook under Samuel's patient instruction, and while her biscuits still tended toward the hockey puck end of the spectrum, she could make a decent breakfast and a passable stew. They worked the ranch together from sunup to sundown, moving cattle, mending fences, checking water sources. At night, they took turns keeping watch, though Samuel noticed Rose often stayed up with him, keeping him company through the long hours. They talked about everything during those night watches. Rose told him about growing up on the ranch, about the year the drought almost killed them, about her mother who had loved wildflowers and singing. Samuel told her about the places he had been, the people he had met, the dreams he had mostly given up on having. He found himself telling her things he had never told anyone, and she listened like every word mattered. "Did you ever want your own place?" she asked one night. They were sitting on the porch, sharing a pot of coffee and watching the stars. "Used to dream about it," he admitted. "Having land, building something permanent, but it takes money I never had." "What would you do if you did have it? Your own ranch, I mean," he thought about it. "I would want horses, not just for working, but for breeding. Good stock that could work cattle and handle the desert. Maybe some cattle too, but the horses would be the main thing." Rose was quiet for a moment. "There is good grazing on the north section of the property. My father always said it would be perfect for horses." "It would be," Samuel agreed, not sure where she was going with this. "When we get through this, when the ranch is secure again, maybe we could try it. Horses, I mean, together." His heart skipped. Together. She turned to look at him, and even in the darkness, he could see the vulnerability in her expression. "I cannot pay you enough to make staying worthwhile once this is over. I know that. But if you wanted to stay anyway, if you wanted to be partners in the ranch, we could make it work. Build something bigger." It was not a declaration of love, but it was close. It was Rose offering him the dream he had given up on, offering him a future. Samuel reached out and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "I would like that," he said quietly. "I would like that a lot." She squeezed his hand, and they sat there in the darkness, holding on to each other and the fragile hope that they might actually make it through this. The hope lasted exactly 3 more days. Samuel was in town picking up supplies when he heard the news. The land office had ruled on the water rights dispute, and Carson had won. The creek that ran through Rose's property was now considered part of Carson's water rights, which meant Rose could not legally use it without his permission. Samuel rode back to the ranch faster than was probably safe, his mind racing. Without water access, the ranch was worthless. Carson had outmaneuvered them, used the law to do what rustling could not. Rose was in the barn when he arrived, and he could tell from her face that she already knew. She was standing very still, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. "He sent a man this morning," she said without preamble. "Offered me $500 for the ranch. 500. He knows I cannot run cattle without water. He knows he has one." Samuel wanted to punch something. "There has to be something we can do. Appeal the ruling, find another water source." "The appeal costs money I do not have, and the next water is 5 miles away, too far to drive cattle daily." Her voice was flat, defeated. "It is over, Sam. I lost." "No." He crossed to her, taking her by the shoulders. "No, we are not giving up. There has to be a way." "There is not." She pulled away from him, and he saw tears streaming down her face. "Do you think I have not been lying awake every night trying to find a solution? There is not one. Carson has me cornered. I either sell to him for nothing or I lose everything when I cannot pay the bank note next month. Then we buy more time. I have some money saved. We can know." Rose shook her head firmly. "I will not take your money, Sam. You have worked too hard for it." "This is my problem." "It is our problem," he insisted. "You said it yourself, we are partners." "We are not partners. You are my hired hand, and I cannot even pay you any more." She wiped at her tears angrily. "You should leave. Find work somewhere else before you are dragged down with me." The words hit like a physical blow. "You do not mean that." "I do. There is no future here, Sam, not for the ranch, not for us." "Us." He stepped closer. "Is there an us, Rose?" She looked at him with so much pain in her eyes that it hurt to see. "There could have been, but not now. Not like this. I will not trap you in my failure." Samuel wanted to argue, wanted to shake her and make her see reason. But he could see she was hanging on by a thread, see that pushing her now would only make things worse. So instead, he did the only thing he could think of. He left. He rode his horse into Coolidge and went straight to the saloon. It was barely noon, but he needed a drink and information in that order. The bartender poured him whiskey without comment, and Samuel sat there trying to figure out his next move. Leaving was not an option. He could not abandon Rose, even if she thought she was doing him a favor by pushing him away, which meant he needed to find a way to beat Carson at his own game. But how? "You look like a man with problems," a voice said beside him. Samuel looked up to find an older man with gray hair and a weathered face taking the stool next to him. He wore a suit that had seen better days and had the look of someone who had fallen on hard times. "You could say that," Samuel muttered. "Let me guess. Land dispute? Water rights?" The man signaled for his own drink. "I am a lawyer, was a lawyer, Gerald Mills. I used to practice in Tucson until the drink got the better of me. Now I just hang around small towns looking for sob stories. If you are looking for clients, I cannot pay you. Did not ask for money." Asked if you had a story. Mills downed his whiskey. "I find stories more interesting than payment these days. Tell me what happened." Samuel was not sure why he did it. Maybe it was desperation, or maybe it was the way Mills looked at him with sharp, intelligent eyes that said he was not as far gone as he pretended. Either way, Samuel told him everything. The rustling, the water rights ruling, Carson's offer. Mills listened without interrupting. When Samuel finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I know the judge who ruled on that water case. Used to play cards with him. He is a good man but not particularly smart. I would bet money he did not read the original land grant properly." "What do you mean?" Arizona land grants from the territorial days are complicated. Lots of Spanish and Mexican law mixed in with American rules. Water rights specifically were usually tied to prior use, not just proximity. If the Walker family has been using that creek since before Carson bought his land, they would have priority. Mills tapped his finger on the bar. "Do you know when Rose's father filed his claim? She said he built the ranch 15 years ago. So 1868. And Carson, I think his ranch is newer." "Maybe 10 years. Mills grinned, and for a moment, Samuel could see the sharp lawyer he must have been. "Then we might have a case. If I can find the original land grant and water filing, I can petition for a review. It is a long shot, but it is something." "Why would you do this?" "You said yourself you do not want payment." The older man's expression grew serious. "Because men like Carson are why I started drinking in the first place. I spent 20 years watching rich men use the law to crush decent people, and I could not stop it. Could not fix it. Eventually, I just stopped trying." He looked at Samuel. "Maybe this time I can actually help. Maybe that would be worth something." Samuel felt a surge of hope. "What do you need from me?" "Access to any documents Rose's father had, land grants, water claims, anything legal, and time." "This will not be quick. We do not have much time. She has to pay the bank note in a month." Mills nodded slowly. "Then I better get started. Where is the ranch?" They rode back together, and Samuel felt his spirits lift for the first time in days. It was a long shot. Mills had said so himself, but it was better than nothing. Better than watching Rose lose everything. Rose was surprised to see them but invited Mills inside when Samuel explained. She dug out all of her father's papers, boxes of documents that had been stored in a trunk. Mills settled at the kitchen table with a lamp and started going through them with painstaking care. "This might take a while," he said, already absorbed in the work. "Why do you not two go do ranch things and let me work?" Outside, Rose turned to Samuel. "Where did you find him?" "Saloon." "I know how it sounds, but I think he is the real deal, or he was anyway." "A drunken lawyer," Rose said, but there was a hint of humor in her voice. Well, we are desperate enough to try anything. She looked at him, really looked at him. I am sorry for what I said earlier. You did not deserve that. You were scared and hurting, I understand. That is not an excuse. She took a deep breath. The truth is, I was trying to push you away before you left on your own. I thought if I did it first, it would hurt less. Rose, I am not leaving. You might have to. If this does not work, if I lose the ranch, I will have nothing to offer you. Samuel took her hands in his, holding tight. Do you really think I am here for the ranch? Rose, I am here because of you. Because you are brave and stubborn and make terrible biscuits but keep trying anyway. Because when you laugh, it makes me want to hear it again. Because I have spent 8 years drifting from place to place, and then I met you and suddenly I understood what home meant. Her eyes widened. Sam, I am in love with you, he said simply. Have been for a while now. So whether we have this ranch or not, whether we are rich or poor, I am not going anywhere. Unless you tell me you do not feel the same way, in which case I will respect that and leave. But if there is any chance you might feel the same, I am staying. Rose was crying again, but this time she was smiling too. You complete idiot. Of course I feel the same way. I have been in love with you since you offered to cook dinner that first night and did not act like I was useless for not knowing how. Samuel laughed, giddy with relief. So we are both idiots, apparently. She was still smiling through her tears. What do we do now? Now, he pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. Now we fight for this ranch together, and when we win, we build the life we both want. Horses, cattle, terrible biscuits, everything. My biscuits are getting better, she protested, but she was laughing. They really are not. She kissed him then, and it was everything he had imagined and more. She tasted like coffee and hope, and when she pulled back, her eyes were bright. We are going to make this work. Yes, he agreed. We are. Mills emerged from the house 3 hours later with a triumphant expression and a dusty document in his hands. Found it. The original water filing from 1868. It clearly states prior use rights to the creek, and there is a territorial surveyor's note that confirms the creek as the primary water source for the property. Carson's claim is newer and does not supersede this. Rose grabbed Samuel's arm, her grip tight with hope. Does that mean we can appeal? Better. It means the original ruling was incorrect. I can file for an emergency review with the territorial court in Tucson. If the judge agrees that the local ruling was wrong, he can overturn it immediately. Mills looked between them. I will leave first thing in the morning. It is a 3-day ride to Tucson, maybe a week to get a hearing. Can you hold on that long? We can hold on, Samuel said firmly. That night, after Mills had gone to sleep in the spare room and the ranch was quiet, Samuel and Rose sat on the porch together. She was tucked against his side, his arm around her shoulders, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. I am scared, she admitted quietly. What if this does not work? Then we figure out something else. But I think it will work. Mills knows what he is doing. He seems to. Where did he come from, really? Why is he helping us? Samuel told her what Mills had said about needing to help someone, about wanting his work to matter again. Rose was quiet for a while, thinking. Everyone deserves a second chance, she said finally. I am glad he found us. Me too. She tilted her head up to look at him. Earlier when you said you loved me, did you mean it? Every word. Good. She kissed him softly. Because I love you too. I should have said it earlier, but I was too busy being terrified. We have time now, Samuel said. All the time in the world. He was wrong about that, but he would not know it until later. Mills left at dawn with the documents and enough money from Rose for supplies on the road. He promised to send a telegram as soon as he knew anything. The waiting was hard. Samuel and Rose threw themselves into work, trying to keep busy. They moved the cattle to the far pasture, away from Carson's men. They repaired the barn roof that had been leaking. They even attempted to bake bread together, which ended with flour everywhere and both of them laughing so hard they could barely stand. "I think we killed it," Rose said, staring at the brick-like loaf. "It is definitely dead," Samuel agreed. "Maybe we should stick to my cooking and your other skills." "What other skills? I am a disaster at everything domestic." "You can rope a steer in under 30 seconds. You can track a coyote through rock. You can shoot better than half the men I know. Those are skills." She smiled, leaning against him. "When this is over, when we are really partners, what do you want to do first?" "Marry you," he said without hesitation. Rose froze. "What?" Samuel turned to face her, suddenly nervous. This was not how he had planned to do this, but the words were out now. "I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a few weeks. But Rose, I have never been more sure of anything. I want to marry you, build a life with you, grow old with you on this ranch. If you will have me." She was staring at him with wide eyes. "Are you proposing to me over a dead loaf of bread?" "I know it is not romantic. It is perfect," she interrupted, and she was grinning. "Yes, yes, I will marry you, even though you are insane and clearly have terrible judgment. My judgment got me you, so I would say it is pretty good." She kissed him hard, and he lifted her off her feet, spinning her around the kitchen. When he set her down, they were both breathless and happy. "When?" she asked. "Soon as this is settled. Soon as we know the ranch is ours and we can actually plan a future. Deal." The telegram came 5 days later. Mills had gotten the emergency hearing, and the territorial judge had ruled in their favor. The water rights were restored to the Walker Ranch, and Carson's claim was denied. Rose cried when she read the telegram, and Samuel held her while she shook with relief. "It is over," she whispered. "We won." "We won," he agreed, but they had forgotten about Carson. The man showed up the next day with 3 hired guns. Samuel was working in the barn when he heard horses and looked up to see them riding in. He grabbed his rifle and stepped out, putting himself between the riders and the house. "That is far enough," he called. Carson was a big man with cold eyes and an expensive hat. He looked at Samuel with contempt. "Where is Rose Walker?" "Right here." Rose emerged from the house with her own rifle. "What do you want, Carson?" "I want to talk some sense into you. That water ruling was a mistake. I have already filed an appeal." "Appeal all you want. The law is on our side now." Carson's jaw clenched. "You are making a big mistake. This valley is not big enough for both our operations. Sell to me now while I am still in a generous mood." "I am not selling. Not now, not ever. This ranch is my father's legacy and I am keeping it. Your father was a stubborn fool and you are no better." Carson leaned forward in his saddle. "I could make your life very difficult, Miss Walker. Accidents happen on ranches all the time." Samuel raised his rifle slightly. "That sounds like a threat." "It is a promise." Carson looked between them. "You have 1 week to reconsider. After that, I cannot guarantee your safety." They rode out and Samuel felt ice in his veins. This was not over. Men like Carson did not give up just because the law said no. "We need help," Rose said quietly. "He is going to come after us, Sam." "I know. Let me think." That evening, Samuel rode into Coolidge and found Mills at the saloon. The lawyer had returned from Tucson and was celebrating with whiskey. Samuel explained what had happened, and Mills sobered up quickly. "Carson is dangerous," Mills said, "but threatening you was a mistake. We can use that." "How?" "We go to the territorial marshal. Sheriff Mackin might be in Carson's pocket, but the marshal answers to the territorial governor. If we can get him involved, Carson will have to back off." "Will he listen?" "If I ask him to, yes. Marshal Stone and I go way back. He owes me a favor." Mills stood, swaying slightly. "I will ride to Tucson again tomorrow, talk to him personally. Meanwhile, you two watch yourselves. Do not give Carson an excuse." Samuel rode back to the ranch and found Rose waiting on the porch. He told her the plan and she nodded slowly. So we wait. Again. We wait, he agreed. But this time, we are ready for whatever comes. They took turns on watch that night, but nothing happened. Or the next night. By the third day, Samuel was starting to relax, thinking maybe Carson had decided it was not worth the trouble. He was wrong. The fire started in the barn around midnight. Samuel woke to the smell of smoke and was running before he was fully conscious. The barn was fully engulfed, flames leaping into the night sky. Rose was already there with buckets, trying to fight it, but it was clear the building was lost. "Forget the barn," Samuel shouted. "We have to stop it from spreading to the house." They worked frantically, hauling water from the well and dousing the ground between the barn and the house. The heat was incredible, and Samuel's lungs burned from the smoke. But slowly, painfully, they contained it. The barn burned to the ground, but the house and the animals were safe. As dawn broke, they sat on the porch, exhausted and covered in soot, watching the smoldering ruins. Samuel saw it first, a torch carelessly dropped near the fence line. Evidence. "Carson," Rose said flatly, "we can prove it this time." Samuel picked up the torch carefully. "We take this to the marshal. Mills is not back yet. We do not even know if he got through to the marshal. Then we go ourselves. We ride to Tucson and make them listen." Rose looked at the burned barn, at the ranch her father had built, and Samuel saw her jaw set in that stubborn line he had come to love. "No. We stay. We protect what is ours. If we leave, Carson wins. He can claim we abandoned the property, say we started the fire ourselves for insurance money." "Rose, staying is dangerous. I do not care." She looked at him with fierce determination. "This is my home, Sam, our home. I am not running." So they stayed. They moved the horses to the far pasture and took turns on watch, sleeping in shifts. Samuel sent a rider to Tucson with a message for Mills and the marshal, but it would take days for help to arrive. Carson's men came back 2 nights later. Samuel heard them coming, the sound of hoofbeats in the darkness. He woke Rose and they took up positions, him at the window, her at the door. There were at least 6 riders this time, and they were not trying to be subtle. "Walker, send out the cowboy and we will let you live," one of them shouted. Samuel felt rage burn through him. They wanted him gone so Rose would be vulnerable. Not a chance. "You are on private property." Rose shouted back, "Leave now or I start shooting. Last chance, lady." Rose's response was to fire a shot over their heads. The riders scattered, taking cover, and then all hell broke loose. Bullets slammed into the house, shattering windows. Samuel returned fire, trying to aim for the horses rather than the men. He did not want to kill anyone if he could help it, but he would protect Rose at all costs. The fight lasted maybe 10 minutes, though it felt like hours. Then Samuel heard something that made his heart soar. More gunshots, but from behind the attackers. The riders panicked and fled, and into the yard rode the territorial marshal with 6 deputies and Gerald Mills. Marshal Stone was a tall man with a gray beard and a no-nonsense attitude. He dismounted and surveyed the damage. "Everyone all right?" "We are fine," Samuel said, emerging from the house with Rose. "You came at a good time." "Mills filled me in. Sorry it took so long." Stone looked at the bullet-riddled house and shook his head. "This is going to end tonight." "Deputy, ride to the Carson ranch and bring Hiram in. I do not care if he is sleeping. Drag him here in his nightshirt if you have to." They waited in the pre-dawn darkness, and Samuel kept his arm around Rose. She was shaking, though whether from fear or anger or relief, he could not tell. Probably all 3. Carson arrived an hour later, flanked by deputies. He was dressed and composed, but Samuel saw fear flicker in his eyes when he saw the marshal. "Stone, what is this about?" It is about you hiring men to attack a lawful ranch, Carson. It is about arson and attempted murder. I have evidence, I have witnesses, and I am done with you terrorizing this valley." Stone stepped forward. "You are under arrest." "On what charge? I have been at my ranch all night." "Then you will not mind if my deputies search your property." "I am betting we find some of the men who were here tonight." Stone signaled, and 2 deputies rode off toward the Triple C. "You made a mistake going after these 2, Carson. Made it personal, made it messy. Now you are going to pay for it." Carson's composure cracked. He looked at Rose with pure hatred. "Your father should have sold when he had the chance. This did not have to happen." "My father built something honest," Rose said coldly. "Something you could never understand. I am glad he never sold to you, and I never will." Carson was led away, still protesting his innocence. But over the next few days, the story came out. 2 of his hired men confessed in exchange for lighter sentences, admitting Carson had ordered the rustling and the fire. One even testified that Carson had wanted Rose dead, thinking he could buy the ranch from her estate for nothing. The trial was held in Tucson a month later. Samuel and Rose rode down together with Mills, who served as their representative. Carson was found guilty on multiple counts and sentenced to 20 years in prison. His ranch was seized to pay restitution, and the land was divided among the smaller ranchers in the valley. "It is over," Rose said as they rode back to Coolidge. "Really over this time." "It is," Samuel agreed. "Now we can focus on the future." They were married a week later in a small ceremony at the church in Coolidge. Mills gave Rose away, tears streaming down his face. The whole town turned out, everyone who had secretly been rooting for Rose and against Carson. Even Sheriff Mackin showed up, looking sheepish, and quietly apologized for not being more helpful. The kiss when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife was sweet and full of promise. Rose had worn her mother's dress, carefully preserved in a trunk, and Samuel thought she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. At the reception at the hotel, Mills pulled Samuel aside. "I am leaving tomorrow, heading back to Tucson. You are welcome to stay." "We could use a hand on the ranch," Mills smiled. "I appreciate that, but I think it is time I put myself back together properly. I have been talking to some old colleagues. They say I can rejoin my old firm if I stay sober for 6 months. I aim to try." Samuel shook his hand. "Thank you for everything. We could not have done this without you. You would have found a way. You 2 are fighters." Mills glanced at Rose, who was talking with some of the townswomen. "Take care of her. She is something special." "I know, I will." True to his word, Mills left the next morning. He wrote to them 6 months later from Tucson, saying he had stayed sober and rejoined his firm. He sounded happy, purposeful. Samuel and Rose sent him money for his help, which he returned with a note saying their happiness was payment enough. The ranch flourished over the next year. Samuel and Rose worked from sunup to sundown, rebuilding the barn, expanding the herd, starting the horse breeding program they had dreamed about. Rose's cooking improved slowly, and Samuel only had to throw out her biscuits about half the time now, which they both considered progress. "My cooking will probably end you," she joked one morning, presenting him with slightly charred pancakes. Samuel grinned and pulled her into his lap. "What a way to go, then." She laughed and kissed him, and he thought about how far they had come from that first day when she had stood in the doorway with flour on her face and desperation in her eyes. They had fought for this life, earned every acre and every moment of happiness. A year after their wedding, Rose told him she was pregnant. Samuel was so happy he picked her up and spun her around until she was dizzy and laughing. They spent the next months preparing, building a cradle, turning the spare room into a nursery. Samuel caught himself daydreaming about teaching his child to ride, about passing on everything he knew about the land and the animals. Their son was born on a clear spring morning in 1885. They named him John, after Rose's father, and from the moment Samuel held him, he understood what his own father must have felt. This tiny person, this perfect combination of him and Rose was the future, was everything they had been fighting for. Rose took to motherhood with the same fierce determination she brought to everything else. She was not a natural, she admitted, but she learned. And watching her sing lullabies to John, her voice soft and full of love, Samuel fell in love with her all over again. They hired 2 more ranch hands that year, good men who worked hard and did not ask too many questions about the previous owners. The horse breeding program took off, and within 2 years, they were selling horses all over the territory. The Walker Thornton Ranch, as it was now known, became respected for its quality stock and fair dealing. Samuel sometimes thought about his younger self, the drifter who never stayed anywhere long, who thought he would never have a home. That person felt like a stranger now. He had roots here, deep and permanent. He had Rose, beautiful and stubborn and finally making decent biscuits most of the time. He had John, who was already showing signs of his mother's fierce spirit. He had a ranch that was thriving, land that was his in every way that mattered. On quiet evenings, they would sit on the porch together, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of orange and purple. John would be playing in the yard, and Rose would be tucked against Samuel's side, and everything felt right with the world. "You ever regret it?" Rose asked him one such evening. "Staying here, you could have kept drifting, seen more of the world." Samuel looked at her, at the life they had built, and shook his head. "Not for a second. This is where I was meant to be, with you. Even though my cooking almost did end you a few times." He laughed. "Even though, besides, you are much better now. That stew tonight was actually good. Liar, it was passable at best." But she was smiling. "I love you, Sam Thornton." "I love you too, Rose Thornton." Their second child, a daughter they named Mary, was born in 1887. She had Rose's red hair and Samuel's blue eyes, and she was absolutely fearless. By the time she could walk, she was following her brother everywhere, determined to keep up despite being half his size. The ranch continued to grow. They bought the land that had once been Carson's after it was sold off, expanding their grazing territory. They built a new barn, bigger than the one that had burned, and a bunkhouse for the hands. Samuel trained horses, and Rose managed the books and the cattle. They worked together like they had always been a team, anticipating each other's needs, backing each other's decisions. In 1890, they hosted a 4th of July celebration at the ranch. Half of Coolidge turned out, and the yard was full of people laughing and eating and celebrating. Samuel stood on the porch, watching Rose move through the crowd with Mary on her hip and John trailing behind. She caught his eye and smiled, that same smile that had caught him from the first day, and his heart was so full it almost hurt. Mills came to visit that fall, traveling from Tucson. He looked good, healthy and sober, wearing a proper suit and carrying himself with confidence. They spent an evening on the porch talking about everything and nothing. "You did it," Mills said, watching John and Mary play in the yard. "Built the life you wanted." "We did," Samuel corrected. "Could not have done it without your help." "I am glad I could help. That whole situation gave me a reason to get sober, to remember why I became a lawyer in the first place. So really, you helped me too." Mills raised his coffee cup in a toast. "To second chances." "To second chances," Samuel echoed. The years rolled on, full and good. John grew tall and strong, learning the ranch business from his parents. Mary turned out to be a natural with horses, able to gentle even the most stubborn animals. They added more children, another boy and twin girls, filling the house with noise and laughter. Samuel taught all his children to ride, to rope, to understand the land. But more importantly, he taught them the values Rose's father had instilled in her: honesty, hard work, treating people fairly. The Walker Thornton Ranch became known not just for its horses, but for being a place that dealt square with everyone. Rose never did become a great cook, though she improved enough that her family ate her meals without complaint most of the time. It became a running joke between them, the things Samuel would tease her about when he wanted to make her laugh. And she always laughed, never taking offense, secure in the knowledge that he loved her exactly as she was. In the spring of 1895, they stood together at the dedication of the new schoolhouse in Coolidge. They had donated the land and most of the money to build it, wanting to give back to the community that had supported them. The whole town turned out for the ceremony, and when the mayor asked Samuel to say a few words, he spoke about the importance of education and opportunity, about how everyone deserved a chance to build something meaningful. Afterward, Rose squeezed his hand. "Your father would be proud of you." "So would yours," Samuel replied. That night, with the children finally asleep and the ranch quiet, they lay in bed together. Rose's head was on his chest, his arm around her, and Samuel thought about the long road that had brought them here. The fear and the fighting, the love that had grown between them, the family they had created. "You remember that first night?" Rose asked softly. "When I burned the biscuits and you said my cooking would probably end you, and I said what a way to go." She laughed quietly. "I knew then. I think I knew that very moment that you were going to change my life. Best decision I ever made, coming to this ranch. Best decision I ever made, letting you stay." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, secure in the love they had built and the life they shared. Years continued to pass in the peaceful rhythm of ranch life. Samuel's hair went gray at the temples, and Rose found laugh lines around her eyes. Their children grew up, fell in love, started families of their own. John took over the day-to-day running of the ranch, though Samuel and Rose still worked alongside him. Mary married a horse trainer from California and moved away, but she visited often with her growing family. In 1905, Samuel and Rose celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary with a party at the ranch. All their children and grandchildren were there, along with friends from all over the territory. Samuel stood on the porch, watching the celebration, feeling the weight of years and blessings. Rose found him there and slipped her hand into his. "What are you thinking about?" "About how lucky I am. About how I could have rode past this ranch all those years ago, taken a different job, never met you." "But you did not." "No, I did not." He pulled her close. "Best 20 years of my life, Rose Thornton. Mine too, even if you still make fun of my biscuits. Your biscuits deserve to be made fun of." She swatted him, but she was laughing. They stood there together, watching their family, surrounded by the life they had built from nothing but determination and love. Samuel Thornton had been a drifter once, a man without roots or purpose. But Rose Walker had changed all that. She had given him a home, a family, a reason to stay. And in return, he had given her his whole heart, his loyalty, his partnership in building something that would last long after they were gone. The Walker Thornton Ranch would continue for generations, passed down through their children and their children's children. The story of how it began, how a drifter cowboy and a stubborn rancher's daughter fell in love over burned biscuits and faced down rustlers and corrupt neighbors, would become family legend. But for Samuel and Rose, it was simply their life. The life they had chosen, fought for, and cherished. On quiet evenings, they still sat on the porch together, holding hands and watching the sunset. The desert had not changed much over the years, still harsh and beautiful and unforgiving. But they had tamed a piece of it, made it bloom, built something permanent in a place where everything was supposed to be temporary. "Do you think we did good?" Rose asked one such evening. They were older now, their children grown and managing most of the ranch work. Samuel looked at her, at the woman who had stolen his heart with flour on her face and determination in her eyes. "We did better than good. We did everything right." She smiled and leaned her head on his shoulder. "I love you, Sam Thornton. Have since the day you walked through that door." "I love you too, Rose. Always have, always will." The sun set over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and Samuel and Rose sat together in the home they had built, surrounded by the love they had created. It had not been an easy road, but it had been theirs. And looking back, neither of them would change a single moment. They had fought for their love, for their land, for their future. And they had won. Not just the ranch, not just the security, but something far more valuable. They had won each other, won the right to grow old together, to see their children thrive, to leave a legacy of honesty and hard work and love. The Walker Thornton Ranch stood as a testament to what two people could build when they refused to give up, when they chose each other despite the odds, when they believed that love was worth fighting for. And years later, when their grandchildren asked them about the early days, about how they fell in love, Samuel would always start the same way. "Your grandmother tried to cook for me that first night," he would say, his eyes twinkling. "And she said her cooking would probably end me." "And what did you say?" the children would ask, even though they had heard the story 100 times. Rose would smile and take his hand. "He said what a way to go then." And she would kiss him, just like she had all those years ago, and the children would groan and laugh and know that they came from a love story that had stood the test of time. A love that had been forged in the Wild West, tested by danger and hardship, and had emerged stronger than steel. Samuel and Rose Thornton lived long, full lives, surrounded by family and love until the very end. They passed within a year of each other, Rose first and then Samuel, unable to imagine continuing without her. They were buried on a hill overlooking the ranch, under matching headstones that simply said, "Together always." The ranch continued to thrive under their children's care, then their grandchildren's, each generation adding their own chapter to the story while honoring the foundation Samuel and Rose had built. The house where they had lived, where they had raised their family, was preserved and cherished. The porch where they had spent countless evenings watching the sunset became a sacred space, where family would gather to remember the two people who had started it all. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the light hit just right, people swore they could see two figures on that porch, sitting close together, holding hands and watching the desert sunset. Whether it was ghosts or memory or just wishful thinking, no one could say. But everyone agreed that if any love was strong enough to transcend death, it was the love between Samuel and Rose Thornton. Their story became part of Arizona legend, the cowboy and the rancher's daughter who fell in love over terrible cooking and built an empire together. It was told around campfires and dinner tables, passed down through generations, a reminder that true love could survive anything if two people were brave enough to fight for it. The ranch they had saved, the family they had created, the legacy they had built, all stood as proof that sometimes the best things in life come from taking a chance on a stranger at your door. That sometimes love arrives dusty and tired from a long ride, offering to cook dinner and help fight rustlers. That sometimes forever begins with a joke about bad cooking and a cowboy who was willing to risk everything for one more day with the woman he loved. Samuel and Rose's love story was not perfect. It was messy and hard and full of challenges that would have broken lesser people. But it was real, and it was theirs, and in the end, that was all that mattered. They had found each other against all odds, had built a life that exceeded their wildest dreams, and had loved each other fiercely until their last breaths. That was their legacy. Not just the land or the horses or the thriving ranch business, but the proof that love, real love, was worth any sacrifice. That two people who chose each other, who stood together against whatever the world threw at them, could build something that would last forever. And on those quiet Arizona evenings, when the desert wind whispered through the valley and the sun painted the sky in impossible colors, you could almost hear Rose's laughter and Samuel's voice, still teasing her about her cooking, still loving her with everything he had. "My cooking will probably end you," she had joked. "What a way to go, then," he had replied, and he had meant every word.